Most students believe that if they learn a lot of new words and do a lot of grammar exercises, they'll be able to speak English fluently, but I disagree with that. Why? Let's take two football players, Jim and Bob. Jim has been playing football for a year. Bob has been studying football for 5 years. Jim knows exactly how to play football because he has been playing it for 365 days. Bob knows everything about the game, but he has never really played football. Question: if there was a football championship and you had to bet $1,000 on one of them, who would you pick? Jim with the skill and experience, or Bob with all the knowledge but zero experience? English language is the same. It's a skill to be practiced, not a science to be studied. Let me repeat that. English is a skill, not a science. You don't study it, you just play it. So it's not about how many words or how much grammar you know, it's about how much English you can actually use while speaking or writing. I strongly believe that a guy who can use 100 words in 1,000 different ways is 10 times better than a guy who knows 1,000 words but doesn't know how to use them. So stop studying English and start playing it. How do you do that? You can use my top 10 technique to find English materials to play English, and here's how you do it. Step 1. Find something you're really interested in. Step 2. Get all types of content from the internet. Step 3. Use net time to learn from them every day. Step 1. Let's say you're like me and you love personal development. Step 2. Google top 10 personal development blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, and mobile apps, one at a time, and choose only top 3 for each type of content. Step 3. Use net time, no extra time. When you are on the bus, you can listen to podcasts. When you are on the subway train, you can use apps and read blogs. When you're at home eating dinner, you can watch YouTube videos. In fact, YouTube is my favorite because you can download a YouTube video, watch it, and convert it into MP3 and listen to it. By doing all this, 1. You save time because you don't really have to go home and study English. 2. You create this English environment where you don't need a native speaker to practice with. 3. You feed your mind on a daily basis with something which you can use to become a better person. Why does it work? People have different learning styles such as visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Visual learners learn faster by seeing. Auditory learners learn faster by hearing. Kinesthetic learners learn faster by doing. Therefore, videos, podcasts, apps, and blogs can help you learn much faster than just one type of content, such as a textbook. So, here's the first idea from the book. English is physical sport. Stop studying English and start playing it. I remember about 2 years ago I decided to start a YouTube channel because I wanted to help 1 million people learn English, and YouTube seemed to be the right place to do that fast. However, after about 4 months of hard work, meaning 3 to 5 hours of daily unpaid work, I had almost no views on my videos other than the ones I got from my friends on Facebook. The channel was a complete failure. Then I gave up on the channel and went on with my life, but I didn't give up on the idea. I kept reading and learning from other guys who had successful channels. This time, however, I didn't even use my Facebook friends to support my channel. What was happening while I was learning about YouTube? I was learning a ton of English. Why didn't I quit after a failure? Because I had a big real-world goal to motivate myself for success. How can you set a big real-world goal to motivate yourself? Let me tell you a story that explains what I mean. There was a Native American tribe and the government wanted to make them more productive. So one day they sent their top agent to help them out. The agent was a very smart man. Instead of trying to persuade each member of the tribe, he decided to go to the top and talk to the chief because he thought, if I can get him to join, everybody else will join. So he went to the chief. The government sent me to help you and I want to help you. I want to put you to school. The Indian chief said, why would I want that? Well, after you graduate, you can get a good job and make a living. The Indian chief said, why would I want that? Well, when you make a living, you can buy your own home and have some kids and you can save some money. The Indian chief said, why would I want that? Well, when you work hard and save enough money, you can retire. Why would I want that? When you retire, you can do whatever you want. You can go hunting, you can go fishing, you can sail all day long. You can do just whatever you want. The Indian chief said, well, I'm doing that right now. The moral of the story is, if you keep asking why, you will get to your big goal inside of you. In the book, AJ gives a practical exercise to find out your big goal by using questions. Read the book to find out. So the idea number 2 is use big real-world goals to motivate yourself for success. What do students usually do when they find a new word? They take their notebook, write the word down with its dictionary definition, and that's it. Believe it or not, every time I see someone with lists, I feel pain inside, because personally, I've had this experience and I know exactly what it feels like to learn from a word list. Let me tell you something. Our brains simply hate lists. To the brain, it's like eating a plastic sandwich or a sheet of paper. It has no taste, no juice, nothing to enjoy, and nothing to remember. But if you learn phrases, a group of words, you will see a big difference. You will remember the words much better. Why? Because when you see a phrase, you remember the story. Let's take the word worry. Does it remind you of anything? Probably nothing. What if I say,
It means no worries for the rest of your days.
You know exactly what I'm talking about if you have seen The Lion King. You probably remember how Simba walks around singing a song with Timon and Pumbaa because they have nothing to worry about. In your mind, you'll see this picture and feel some positive emotions, and this will help you remember the word for a long time. What about grammar? AJ says, quote, when you learn phrases, you're not just learning the individual word, you're learning grammar too. You're learning how to use that word correctly with other words. You don't need to think about grammar. You don't need to know the rules or worry about verb tenses. It's automatic. You will use the word correctly in a phrase because that's how you remembered it, unquote. Now, let me give you my personal advice about learning new words. In my opinion, once you reach a certain level where you can understand 80% of whatever you hear and read, you should completely stop collecting new words. What? Yeah, you heard me. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I wrote a new word down to remember it. Why did I stop collecting new words? Well, do you remember the last time you wrote a new word down in your native language to learn it? You've almost never done it, right? English should be no different. If you keep feeding your mind with interesting English on a daily basis, your brain will pick up new words subconsciously and you will be able to use them correctly even though you don't know exactly what they mean. It feels like magic, my friend. Let me give you an example. The other day I was chatting with a native speaker and I used the phrase lock in on your goals. After the conversation I thought, wow, how did I do that? I was surprised because I had never looked it up on a dictionary and I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I used it 100% correctly in the right context. I knew it because the American repeated it after me to make another point. I know how it happened. I have a collection of motivational audios and I've listened to this one particular audio 20 or 30 times and the guy in the audio says, lock in on your dream again and again in a loud voice. He almost shouts it out loud with some strong emotions and that just stuck in my head. Same thing is gonna happen to you when you take your favorite audio and listen to it many times. Some phrases are gonna just stick in your head whether you write them down or not. The idea number 3 is learn phrases, not words. Honestly, the following idea was shocking and it was really hard for me to accept it because just like most people, I used to believe that grammar study was the only way to become fluent in another language, but one day I was listening to AJ's 7 rules and he said, stop studying grammar. And I thought, what? Stop studying grammar? How can I ever learn a language without grammar? Something's wrong with this dude. I just couldn't believe it. So, I kept on studying grammar until one day I found this book I'd been looking for. It was titled something like Advanced English Grammar. I was so excited because I thought, if I do all the exercises in this book, I'm gonna become fluent in English. Yay! So I began doing the exercises, which I didn't really like because they gave me a headache. I kept doing it even though it was super boring. I thought it was the only way to fluency. However, one day I was reading through this unit about the articles the and a, and I had a hard time doing the exercises, so I went to the back of the book where it had more detailed explanations. When I opened the page, I was shocked for real. There were at least 2 pages full of different rules to use the articles. I guess there were 50 plus rules and they were all different from one another. Use the before the names of these countries and these oceans and these streets, but don't use it before these things. And I was like, what? Am I supposed to remember 50 rules and be able to choose the correct one while talking to a native speaker and at the same time think about what to say next in order not to lose the flow of the conversation? Are you freaking kidding me? That's when I realized that AJ was right. And you know what? The 50 rules was not the only problem. Back then, when I spoke to native speakers, I'd be pretty nervous because I'd analyze my sentences before saying them. I'd be thinking, should I use the past tense or the present perfect? And because of that, my speech was slow and hesitant. I couldn't really speak without thinking, and I just didn't know what was wrong because I did very well on tests. Almost 100% of my answers would turn out to be correct, but when it came to speaking, I mean real speaking, not practicing dialogues, but speaking to a foreigner in English, I just sucked. I know what you're thinking. You are probably thinking, okay, I got it. I mustn't study grammar, but how do I learn it? The answer is simple. Intuitive grammar. AJ says, quote, what does intuitive grammar mean exactly? Intuitive mastery of spoken grammar is based on a feeling for correctness. This is the method that native speakers use to learn and master English grammar. By avoiding grammar study, learning phrases, and using other natural methods, the native speaker learns to identify what sounds right, unquote. We do this with our own language. When we speak, we never think about grammar, but when someone makes a mistake, we know it's a mistake, but we cannot tell why it's a mistake because it simply sounds wrong. We have developed a feeling for correctness, and that's what intuitive grammar is all about. It's about feeling the language without knowing much about the language. If you want to know more about how you can learn grammar naturally, you can watch my video titled Grammar Through Stories, where I do a research right in the video and show you exactly why stories are a much better option when it comes to learning grammar. So the idea number 4 is grammar study kills your English speaking. There was a researcher named Dr. Paul Schulzberger at Victories University in New Zealand. In 2009, he did a research on the subject of language learning, and he said, neural tissue required to learn and understand a new language will develop automatically from simple exposure to the language. This is how babies learn their first language. And it is so true because no baby has ever learned his or her language through grammar exercises, vocabulary lists, and tests. As I said earlier, babies spend a few years simply listening before they begin to speak. They listen and listen and listen for a long time until they understand very well. What about you? How did you learn your first language? Did you study rules and memorize word lists? Of course not. Then how did you learn it so well? You learned your language with your ears by listening. That's why it's so easy for you to speak your language, but I'm sure it's difficult for others to learn it. According to Dr. Stephen Krashen, comprehensible input, which means understandable listening and reading, is the most important aspect of language learning because when you hear or read something in another language and you can understand it, You will learn some language whether you like it or not, and the more you do it, the sooner your speech emerges. Therefore, you shouldn't really worry much about speaking before listening to understandable English for at least 100 hours, because speaking is the result of interesting and understandable listening. You can watch my video titled "The Best Kept Secret in Language Education" to learn more about comprehensible input. AJ gives a great metaphor for listening and speaking. Think of it like a flower seed in the ground. The seed, your speaking ability, is always there. However, the seed needs water in order to grow and emerge from the ground. Likewise, our brains need a lot of understandable listening for effortless speech to emerge. But remember this, your listening ability will always be higher than your speaking ability. I've read somewhere that your listening ability is usually 1 year ahead of your speaking ability. So don't worry if you can't really use the things you understand 100% in your speech. Instead, focus on listening to interesting and understandable English even more, because your listening ability grows along with your speaking, but it will always be higher. Again, don't worry much about your speaking and focus on listening more. You must be thinking, but what should I listen to? Well, I would suggest that you go to effortlessenglish.libsyn.com and download all the podcasts that seem interesting to you and listen to them one by one. Not only will you improve your speech, you will learn some interesting ideas about language learning and about life in general. Effortless English podcasts will serve you as a bridge between easy stories and real fast American English, and this is exactly what I did. I listened to almost all the podcasts. In some of the podcasts, AJ talks about great leaders such as Tony Robbins that helped him to change his life for the better. And I found their videos, audios, and listened to them too. It was difficult at first, but over time I got used to it. Here are some of the podcast websites that I have personally used. If you are interested in online business like me, you will love them. My favorite YouTube channels. What I love about YouTube videos is that you can download a video, convert it into MP3, and listen to it after watching it, so you can get more repetitions. But make sure you go through at least 70% of AJ's podcasts first before moving on to the websites and channels. How can you use this idea to boost your English? It's simple. Step 1. Choose one of the resources you found online after using my top 10 technique, or a video from YouTube or a podcast. Make sure it's 10 minutes long. The shorter, the better, because you will be more focused and it will be easier for you to remember. But if your material is longer than 10 minutes, it's fine. Step 2. Download the Android app called Brain Focus or Pomodoro and set the timer to 25 minutes. Step 3. Listen or read non-stop for 25 minutes or until you hear your app go ding-dong. Then take a break for 5 minutes. Repeat this process 4 times and you will have played English for 100 minutes, which means your English got 100 minutes stronger than before and you got 100 minutes closer to your goal. Yay! I just can't stress this enough. If there were one idea that you need to take from this video, it would be this. Learn with your ears. So, the idea number 5 is learn with your ears. There was a Spanish teacher in California. His name was Blaney Ray. He had a problem. His students were not interested in doing grammar drills and memorizing word lists. In the 1990s, he created a learning system called TPRS, Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling. Telling simple stories and asking questions to get repetitions of the most important phrases in the language were the heart of his learning system, because he believed this was the way to learn to speak another language. Nowadays, his method is famous all over the world and thousands of students have succeeded in learning a second language with the help of TPRS. If you want to know more about this method, watch my video titled TPR Storytelling, the best way to teach and learn a language, and watch the following video on the playlist to see an example. Back to Blaney Ray. He found that his students learned grammar much faster with the same story told in different time frames such as the past, the present, and the future. AJ uses the same thing and he calls it point of view stories. Here's a sample point of view story. AJ says, quote, "When you learn grammar like this, using these kinds of stories, you're training like an athlete and you're freeing yourself from the hidden curriculum. This is the difference between learning grammar as abstract knowledge and acquiring the skill of using grammar in real speech. You want the skill. You want to use correct grammar without thinking about it." Unquote. In the book, he talks about psychological benefits and a fun practice exercise to create your own POV stories. Read the book to find out. So the idea number 6 is learn grammar intuitively and unconsciously. About 5 years ago, I moved from AJ's podcast to Tony Robbins' seminars. At that time, I had already listened to AJ's podcast for a year or so and had heard the name Tony Robbins several times, so it was interesting for me to listen to another native speaker who spoke on a completely different subject, the subject of personal development. I remember the first time I got Tony's seminar, converted it into MP3 and listened to it on my way home. I was almost shocked because I could hardly understand 50 to 60% of what he was saying. I could understand AJ 100% without any difficulty, but Tony was so fast. I mean, I couldn't even catch up with the guy, and I thought, wow, that's awesome, a challenge. I guess that night was the beginning of my journey into real English. It was hard in the beginning, but over time I got used to Tony's too fast English, and understanding other motivational speakers was a piece of cake as compared to Tony. However, I can undoubtedly say that without AJ's podcasts, it would have been a serious challenge for me to get used to Tony's fast-paced English. Over the past 5 years, I've listened to hundreds of great speakers such as Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Robert Kiyosaki, Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Harv Eker, and the list goes on. And what I learned that the way Native Americans speak is way different from the way textbook actors speak. Textbooks use very formal style of English, some of which would sound weird in a conversation, and the people who study textbooks end up being unable to understand native speakers because they almost use a different language. Does this sound familiar? Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And you? Now, what about this? How you doing? How's it going? Hey, what's up? What you doing? Nice to meet you. I've never seen a textbook that teaches you these, but this is what native speakers actually say. These are just simple greetings. There are also idioms, slang, and different accents. You get all this from real English materials. If you're learning English and can understand this video without a dictionary, it's time for you to move to real English for native speakers, not for English learners. Even if your English is not that good, still your aim should be to move to real English as soon as possible. Here's another idea for you. Take the audio version of this book and listen to it wherever you go. Let it be your best friend that is with you wherever you go. Listen to it on the bus, while walking, while doing housework, while waiting, just about everywhere. Listen, listen, and listen. You can also use the top 10 technique that I mentioned earlier to get different types of content in order to match your learning style and learn even faster. So the idea number 7 is learn real English. When you talk to your friends, what do you usually talk about? You probably talk about the things that have happened before. How do you do that? You tell them a story, right? Questions such as, "You are not gonna believe what just happened," or "Do you know what John did yesterday?" make you want to listen attentively, right? And usually what follows such questions is a story, because humans are natural storytellers and our entire lives revolve around stories. Your life up to this point can be turned into a story. Just think about your childhood for a moment. It's full of fun, crazy, happy, and sometimes sad stories, right? Stories are incredibly powerful because they are full of emotions which can help you remember the information much faster. For example, comedies and horror movies are easier to remember because they give the viewers lots of positive and negative emotions. Just think about the last movie you've seen. What you remember is the scenes in the movie which gave you either extremely positive or extremely negative emotions. Someone falls in love or someone dies. In my opinion, stories have another benefit, and it's very simple. Every story has three things in common. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you look at textbooks, they're just full of boring dialogues which have neither a beginning nor an end. Would you like to watch a movie which consists of a dialogue only? Not really. Why do so many students focus on textbooks then? Because they don't know how powerful stories are. I've been teaching English for 7 years, and stories have been the heart of my language teaching system, and they've helped hundreds of my students get into top universities in my country as well as abroad. Not only have they learned English, but they've learned some life lessons as well from stories such as Cinderella Man, Christmas Carol, and The Count of Monte Cristo. From Cinderella Man, for example, you can learn about what a real man, a real husband, and a real father should be like. As you can see, you can get twice as much value from stories than some academic materials. That's another reason why you must learn with stories. So the final idea, number 8, is learn English with compelling stories. Okay, the book has a lot more interesting ideas such as your English learning plan, the power of pleasure reading, and why you should not practice speaking. But I want you to read the book to get those ideas as well. Now, let's recap the main ideas. 1. English is physical sport. 2. Use big real-world goals to motivate yourself for success. 3. Learn phrases, not words. 4. Grammar study kills your English speaking. 5. Learn with your ears, not with your eyes. 6. Learn grammar intuitively and unconsciously. 7. Learn real English. 8. Learn English with compelling stories. If I had to choose only one idea out of 10, it would be learn real English, but I would like to add to it. Learn real English which is focused on what you love, because this changed my life and it will change yours too if you use it. If this video gets 100 likes, I'll make another video on a book titled Who Moved My Cheese, which is a great book on personal development, and it's easy for language learners to understand. So like this video if you want more, and also leave comments on any topics you want me to discuss. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more awesome videos.